who said that it was too dangerous, that they were worried about being arrested. And I thought, if you're a white middle-class college student and it's too dangerous for you, why am I doing it? And I ended up being able to bring like 5 people. And the way it was kind of planned is that I'd disrupt, and then I'd get kicked out, and then people would disrupt in succession. But I was the only one kicked out because everyone I brought didn't do anything. They didn't disrupt. So I was the only one that got, and like what you don't see there is like, I got kicked out. I went to a building nearby. I had a change of clothes in my bag that I hid in a bathroom. I changed my clothes, snuck back in. Someone grabbed me, like a volunteer, and they're like, he's back. And then I just ran because I didn't want to get like arrested or in any more trouble. But yeah, I did it just because I think it's necessary to speak up and to disrupt spaces where especially white liberals just want to like live their political dream, when I believe it's literally built on the back of black people, indigenous people, poor people. And yeah, and it was like a very illuminating experience because a lot of people said to me afterwards, like, oh, like, so glad you did that. Like, I was there and I was hoping someone else would do it. And I would always say, you should have done it.
And what was the reaction like? Because in the video you can see a couple of white people getting agitated. So after the disruption,
I don't know, like that is in Athens, Ohio, which is a college town. It's where I went to university. It has around 20,000 residents and 20,000 students, so it's a smaller town. I put the video online. It got like, I don't know, I think like tens of thousands of views within like the next day or so. I had all kinds of people messaging me saying how proud of me they were. I had a friend who was going to Ohio University at the time, and she said her professor like had the class analyze the video for like an hour and look at the ways that people reacted, which I thought was really interesting. But I mean, I got a lot of support, but I also got a lot of weird reactions from certain friends that I had. Like I had, I don't know, a lot of friends that I really was hoping would be there or would help, and they didn't. And so I kind of had to confront within myself, like, why am I friends with people that don't step up when it's necessary? Like, I was thinking, like, Trump might literally be president. Like, all these things are happening around the US, and you're just sitting at home, like, expecting other people to do the work. And, like, I'd say the weirdest reactions I got were, I had a friend who, we're still friends. Their name is TC, and we were at a bar, and this friend came up to me and said, like, pulled me aside, like, really seriously and was like, you know, like, I'm really worried for your safety, and I just really, like, it worries me. Like, I just want you to be careful. And I had to tell this friend, I was like, I don't need your worry. I need you to do something, because it can't just be me. And so it helped me learn a lot of things. And I also just think scaring white people is really fun sometimes, because a lot of people were just really surprised and staring at me as I was screaming as I was leaving, and I was thinking, like, don't you care about the history of any of these candidates that are, like, here? Or maybe you just don't need to.
so I mean, Hillary is clearly out, but how do you identify politically?
We had a joke that I was gonna say. I was gonna say I'm a Trump supporter. I'm not gonna use that joke. But I don't know, I'd say far leftist. I've been reading a lot more into like different modes of like black resistance, and new African anarchist is like a term that I've come across where, I don't know, I believe that like in order to like have a better world, we have to tear down the systems that are around us, which includes like capitalism, white supremacy, and new African anarchism kind of ties that to the way black people, African people kind of have liberatory practices in their communities, like not calling the cops, or I don't know, like have de-escalating in your neighborhood because you don't call the cops and you need to diffuse situations, or like, I don't know, like I feel like in the 70s and 80s, like it was really common in black communities, like if someone stole stuff from out of your house, you went to their house, you got your stuff back, and that was just how you handled it. You didn't have to call the police. So yeah, definitely along those lines.
And what experiences have compelled you to kind of explore what you're exploring? I mean, there must have been certain experiences, lived experiences that you've been through that kind of pushed you towards writing about what you're writing. So
I grew up reading. No one in my family really reads, but my mother would always take me to the library, and I just loved books. And when I was 13, I had a teacher that assigned a short story, and I don't know. I always get embarrassed when I say this, but I don't know. From age like 14 to 20, I wrote like 6 novels, just like at home. I don't know. I was just kind of obsessed, and I wrote short stories and poetry, and I studied creative writing in college. So I think writing was always kind of there as something I could tie myself to. But I don't know. Like being a teenager is hard, but for me it was hard because I was gay in a Jamaican family. Like Jamaica has a very long history of like homophobia, transphobia, because of like evangelical Christian missionaries and because of British colonialism. And so growing up, I was exposed to just like a lot of really casual, violent language about gay people. And I think writing helped me kind of imagine like a better life, but in a weird way, which I don't talk about. Like I only wrote with white characters until like 3 or 4 years ago. And I think that's about like me understanding my own history and finding power in it and wanting to write to it. Also, like when I was 13, my stepfather went to prison. He like was a drug dealer most of my childhood, and he was in prison until I was like 17. So being in and out of prisons and visiting him, and I don't know, like you hear growing up, like be careful around the police or don't do this or don't do that. But going into a prison like once a month to visit your father, I don't know, it made me angry. Like I just thought like this beautiful person that I love is locked up for what? For something that he did like 10, 15 years ago. And it's all mixed in and complicated, which is what I'm kind of writing about in my book. But even like my stepfather got out of prison, and he was in Jamaica because he was deported, and I came out to him, and kind of very similar to my mother, he was just like you're gay, like I don't ever want to talk about that. I don't need that to be a part of my life. So in so many of the things that I experience and do, like there's always like a conflict, and I think my writing is like working through that because I can go out into the world and like I don't know, like find my chosen family, but the world is also still pretty racist. So.
There's this passage from one of your essays in which you talk about going to the prison to visit your stepfather on Sundays. I'm just going to read out a bit from that. Prison visits took up entire Sundays. We would wear nice clothes, drive to the private prison, and pass through the metal gates. Inside, we had to strip our pockets, show our IDs, walk through metal detectors, and appear content with this treatment. I hated the way the prison guards casually handled their jobs as captors. Despite the talk that every black child is given while growing up, seeing the mass of black and brown men in orange jumpsuits was the first time this realization hit home. This country jails us so casually. Do you think this moment when you walked in, because I'm sure when you talk about growing up and people around you having the talk about going to prisons and what the situation is, but when you go and witness it for the first time, how does that move you, and what happens next?
It was definitely a realization, but I think it was more of like you don't really know until you see it. Like you can read about black people, Mexican people, or I can read about what's happening in various parts of India, but seeing it like makes it more real. And I think just like the sort of sterile nature of prisons, the way they're in communities, but you have to drive kind of far off to see them. And I don't know, it's literally like, it's like a lot of white people working in prisons. So I'm like, this is literally like a plantation low-key. And so just seeing that, I don't know, it's like that imagery is like there for me. And I don't know, I don't know if many people understand the notion of the talk for like black parents to their kids, but like if you're a black parent and you have a black kid, like usually around like age 5 or 6 or 7, you usually have to say to them like, when you're in a store, don't pick up a lot of things because the person in the store is gonna think you're stealing. If a cop stops you, don't mouth off, don't be angry, don't reach for anything very quickly. If you're in a car and you get stopped, keep your hands on the wheel. Like all of these rules that you kind of have to follow in order to be safe in America. And I think, I don't know, for me, I don't remember like a specific talk. It was just like something my mother always just kind of casually said. It's like, those white kids can do that, but you can't. And so I don't know, visiting him in prison, like it was just horrible. And like having to take up so much time out of our days to see him and to kind of, I don't know, it was always like a performance as well because I was a teenager. I was angry. I had friends and I wanted to do other things but I also loved him and I wanted to see him. So it was also like in a weird way like I had to confront this institution, but when I was actually there, I just had to kind of perform and pretend to be happy and to pretend like, I don't know, like my mother and I weren't arguing or that things weren't just weird at home. And so I think it's like a combination of like the weirdness of going to this place to visit someone you love, but also like what you have to perform when you go there, which to me is kind of like living a lie and the many lies that I feel like I had to live as a teenager, like getting good grades and pretending to be straight and I don't know, just like wondering what my future would be and definitely going to visit a prison doesn't help any of that.
As a writer, I know that there are other writers who cause what Bloom calls the immortal wound. And for you, that was James Baldwin. And he had a very complex life, and he led a very, he was queer and black and moved out of the US. And I basically want to ask how and why do you associate it? What attracts you about, what compels you to move towards Baldwin and his writings, and how does your work in some ways like find inspiration from Baldwin's works?
Well, I started reading Baldwin my senior year, and then I moved to Seattle, and I had this labor union job, and I was an organizer for this labor union, but I basically got fired for trying to unionize within the union. So I was just kind of like, what's happening? And, and I don't know, like I was just really sad and kind of pessimistic about what the adult world had to offer me. And literally the most visible person I had at the time who was gay and black and a writer, because I'd always wanted to write professionally. I wouldn't until like maybe 2 or 3 years into the future. But I don't know, reading his work like helped me, and I don't know, just kind of like the idea that he got so fed up with America that he just like left. I was just like, And then like I basically like bought a ticket to Paris like a few weeks later, and that's when I went there for the first time in April of 2016. But I think it's just the love that he puts into his work, the way he talks about love, the way he talks about fear, the way like there's a section in one of his books where he says like, the face of a lover becomes a stranger. And I think that speaks to like, you can love someone, but as soon as you feel like you start to know them, you wonder like, what is there that I don't know? And I feel like I've always kind of, because of my family and my experiences coming out, like I definitely go into the world thinking like, I have to find my family out in the world because the family I have isn't ideal. And so I think Baldwin represents that for me, like him befriending Nina Simone and Mary Painter and all of these people in like New York and Paris, and just having the courage to go out into the world and to kind of define what your experience is, I think is something that I admire and try to embody. And I don't know, sometimes I'm just like, dang, am I like really like doing the same exact things that you did? It's kind of creepy. But yeah, and yeah.
And you've traveled extensively around the world. You've been to a lot of countries. So what I wanted to ask you is, how has your experience been as a black traveler? And I mean, is there variations in how people outside of America experience or view your blackness in some way?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, growing up, I went to Jamaica all the time, and even as a kid going there, like I saw how tourists would go, stay at the resort, buy weird things at gift shops, and talk about how clean certain areas were and how dangerous other areas were. But also, like going there, I was always the American. I was always aware that like I had more privilege than like the kids in the neighborhood that my family like lived in. And so I think that early on like framed a lot of travel for me. Like, don't go to a place and just expect everything to be handed to you. Like, I don't know, like really try to live with people. And so like my senior year, I went to Costa Rica for a month with one of my best friends, Eli. After college, when I went to France for the first time, I went to France, I went to Madrid, I went to Budapest. And then like a year and a half later, like after this Bill Clinton stuff, like I went to the Philippines for 3 months. I went to South Korea and I worked at a hostel there for like 6 weeks. And then last year, I went to France for 3 months and stayed with my partner in France. And then I worked at a hostel in Fez, Morocco for like 7 weeks. It was really hot. And then earlier this year, I went to France, and I have some comrades in Barcelona that do a lot of like housing activism, and like they'll literally like squat apartments and then threaten the owner of the apartment to lower the rent for like like an immigrant in the neighborhood. So I'm like, yes, this is cool. But also like I have done all this traveling, but like I literally try to find the cheapest ticket I can. Like in the Philippines, I was couch surfing. I was like meeting people from different socioeconomic backgrounds, and I really like when I go to a place, like I try to learn as much as I can, but I also try to center the fact that like there's always more to learn, and like there's always a reason to go back. And but it's also like painful sometimes. Like in the Philippines, like that was my first time really realizing like, oh, there are parts of the world where some people have never seen a black person in person. And so I don't know, like kids would follow me around and point at me and laugh, and teenagers would follow me and ask to take photos. And really one of the like weirdest and kind of like most cosmic moments was I had a friend who had been to the Philippines who was Black American, and he had visited some of the indigenous communities there, and he was like, I can connect you with people there. You can maybe visit some of these communities, kind of learn, because I don't know, like I know you're having a difficult time with the way people perceive you. Because like, just to give you an example, like one time I was trying to find a bar, and I got off the bus and my phone was dead, and I was walking around looking really confused, and these Filipino cops like were in a car, and they're like, hey, you look like you're lost, you need help. And I was like, oh my God, these cops are about to like beat me up or something. And they were actually really nice, and they offered me a ride, and I was just like, okay, yeah, sure. And I got into their car, and they were just chatting me up. Like 10 minutes into the conversation, they're like, how big is your dick? Is it true what they say about black men? And then I got out of the car very quickly. And like for me, when I've been traveling, like things like that happen so casually. And the disillusionment is in the fact that I can try and go out into the world and be as conscious as possible and try to like center myself and understand that I inherently have like privilege as an American, but it doesn't mean that people have to give me the same kind of respect. And that is like enraging a lot of the times, but also I try to understand that like two truths can exist at the same time. And even being here in like Bangalore and like walking around, like I've had some weird things happen. And like Reggie and I were, I don't know, it's like things can be really uncomfortable, and I don't know many other black men that travel. So a lot of the times I can experience these things, but I don't have many people to talk to about it. And so I'm just like, well, time to lock it up inside and hope it doesn't explode one day. But I also try to like understand it the best I can.
But like being gay and black, like from what I can sense, there are struggles within the community, and there like in Jamaica probably there are still stereotypes. So you kind of have to fight the structure within as well, and within the black community as well. So you're fighting war on two grounds, basically. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. I mean, the black community can be like super into gender, and you got to be a man. And I don't know, growing up, my mother, like it's all the little lessons you learn growing up. Like walking around a store with my mother, she'd always say, you never walk behind a woman. You walk beside her or in front of her. And I'd be like, isn't that kind of degrading to you? And so things like that just never made sense to me at a young age. And then, I don't know, it's like all these, I look back at my life and I'm like, why did this happen? Like around the time that I started thinking like, oh, maybe I'm gay, maybe I should hide it and hate myself. My mother literally sent me to like a private Catholic school. So I was like learning about God and all these other mechanisms. And so like, I don't know, going to like that particular school, and for me growing up, like it was just super casual. If like if someone in my family passes a gay person, they're just like, oh, they should just be sent to an island so they can all die together. And so I'd hear things like that growing up, and it's not even a question of like, oh, like maybe my family will accept me. It's more like, let me get ready for what is gonna happen, because I'm not gonna have most of the things that other people just have with their family, at least in like that particular way. And I was teased a lot growing up. Like, I don't know, like I was in a 3 summer long program when I was in middle school, and it was all about like for like smart black kids to like help them prepare them for high school and like school, and I was bullied a lot. Like I remember like one summer, like kids are so mean. Like these kids like shoved me into the deep end of the pool, and I literally almost drowned. And it was just because they didn't like me because they thought I was gay. And so I don't know, like I've had to unravel a lot of trauma and like confronting my mother and my father about it and really like debating with them over the years and kind of like having to restructure what I think love is, especially like familial love, because I think a lot of families say they love you, but how do you practice that? How do you see the person in front of you? Like my mother doesn't know I went to Standing Rock. My mother doesn't know I interrupted Bill Clinton. My mother doesn't she doesn't know my boyfriend's name. And so there's all these gaps in my family of who I am, and I just kind of have to accept that like that probably will never change, and I can't expect it to because that's just like wasted energy. And so I think like in a lot of ways, like at least in the black community, things are changing. Like there's more gay and queer representation in media, and it's becoming like more of a discourse, like how do we exist in these ways? But in Jamaica, it's still horrible. Like I wrote an article about this like 2 years ago, but Jamaica has only started having pride festivals in the last 5 or 6 years, and the host of Jamaica Pride was murdered in his home 3 years ago, and his neighbors heard someone yelling, "Murder! Murder!" No one called the police. And in Jamaica, there have people that are called gully queens because if you're gay or trans, you can be run out of your neighborhood and you end up homeless and you might steal for food or steal for money and you end up living in the gutters. And if anyone's interested in learning more, like Vice has a documentary about it, but people will run into the gutter at night and try to kill you. And so like the violence there is like still very real and institutional, and there's no protections for like gay people, trans people, LGBTQIA people. But if you also look at the US, like right now with Trump, like his administration has peeled back a lot of protections of a lot of like LGBTQIA people. So I think things are getting better, like socially in a lot of ways, but I don't know, it's like what a lot of people say, like there's a pendulum. And so I think for me as like a gay, black, Jamaican American person, I'm just like, well, time to get ready for whatever might happen.
And what do you think Obama and Trump have revealed about America? Like, what are the differences?
I loved Obama. When he was coming up, I was like, oh my God, there's a black man. But I don't know, of course I learned over time, like any politician is just like kind of a puppet. And I think when Obama was president, like, my mother literally became a U.S. citizen. Like like a permanent resident, and she became a citizen so she could vote for Obama. And so I don't know, like he provided a lot of hope. But during Obama was also when like Michael Brown was killed, and the Black Lives Matter movement happened, and all these mass shootings started happening even more in the U.S. And so I think for me, like what was obvious is that like you can have this articulate black man like saying all these things and representing like a colorblind America, but they'll still shoot you in the street and leave your body in the street for hours for the people in your neighborhood to see, and then like harass people, tear gas them, jail black people. Like in Ferguson after Michael Brown was killed, like this, I can't remember his name right now, but this black teen like burnt a magazine in a gas station during a riot, and he got sent to prison for 8 years. And that was while Obama was president. And so I think he was just kind of like a bandage on like a wound that like America is still suffering from. And I think Trump definitely was like a white lash against the Obama era, because a lot of white